Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're doing a Swordsoul deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this one, guys, because this is actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Jin. And this deck is a crazy awesome deck that's currently one of the best decks of the format. I'm really excited to show you guys this deck because it is super consistent and insanely powerful at the boards it can actually make. It's a really fun deck to be able to play with because it makes all sorts of different synchro monsters that completely control the game. So without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name description in a single video, getting assigned cards to the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. And definitely give Jin some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one, guys. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Swordsoul Moe. This card is a great 3-of in the deck that has the ability that if this card is normal or special summon, you can reveal a Swordsoul or a Worm card in your hand, and then special summon out a Swordsoul token that's a Worm, Tuner, Water, level 4, 0 attack, and 0 defense. And while that token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special monsters from the extra deck except for synchro monsters. And if this card is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, then you get to draw a card. This card is a great normal summon for the deck and helps you out with a lot of different plays, especially to go into your copy of your Grand Master. We then play 3 copies of the Swordsoul Strategist. This card is a great card because it helps us go into our level 10 synchro monsters, because it has the ability that you can discard one other Swordsoul card or a Worm monster to special summon this card from your hand, and then you could special summon out a Swordsoul token that's a Worm, Tuner, Water, level 4, 0 attack, and 0 defense. And while that token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except for synchro monsters. And if this card is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, you can inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent, which is super helpful, especially when you're going into time with this deck. It's super helpful just to do that extra 1200 points of damage to close out a game. We then play just 2 copies of MyTea. MyTea is a good 2-of. I don't feel like you need 3 copies of this card, but because it has the ability that you can banish a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster in the graveyard to special summon out a token to your side of the field that's a tuner. And then it's a really good card because if it's used as synchro material, then you can send a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster from your deck to the graveyard, furthering your plays and extending them out. But I don't think you only need 2 copies of this card, because you already need to have a card in the graveyard to be able to get this card to go off, where these 2 you don't have to. We then play 3 copies of the Incredible Ecclesia, which is an insanely powerful card in this deck, because if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can just instantly special summon her to your side of the field from your hand, and you can only special summon her once per turn this way, and you can only use each of the following effects for once per turn. And she has the ability that during the main phase quick effect, you can tribute this card to special summon 1 Swordsoul or Fallen of Albaz from your hand or deck, and during the end phase, if a fusion monster or if a fusion monsters was in your sent to the graveyard of this turn, add this card from your graveyard to your hand. This card is a really good card in the deck because it basically turns all your Swordsouls into 6-ofs and 5-ofs in the form of MyTea, but it's a really good card in this deck because it helps out a lot with your plays. We then play for the 10U monsters. We're playing 3 copies of Ashuna. Ashuna is really good because all of your 10U monsters share the ability that if you don't control an effect monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can manage this card from the graveyard, hand, or graveyard to get an effect. Where your copy of your Ashuna has the ability to special summon a 10E monster from the deck, which is a really good effect. But the only downside of this card is but you can't special summon anything but worms for that turn, which is a big deal for this deck a little bit sometimes, because you want to go into your copy of Baron de Fleur, but you have plenty of level 10 synchro monsters that you can go into instead. We then play 3 copies of the 10E Spirit Vashuda. Vashuda is a good 3-of as well because it has the ability that if you control no effect monsters, you can just special summon this card from your hand. And if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from the graveyard or your hand to target 1 card your opponent controls and return to the hand, basically being a compulsory evacuation device, which is really good. We then play 3 copies of Adahara. Adahara is really good because it's a level 1 tuner monster, so it helps out your plays a lot, and you can also banish this card from the graveyard to target 1 of your worms that's banished and add it back to your hand, which comes up a lot with the cards that you're playing in this deck. We then play a single copy of the Water Tenyi. This card is just a great 1-of because it's a level 4 monster that you can special summon to your side of the field really easily, so it's a great 1-of in this deck. We then play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. This is basically here just to stop your opponent from touching the deck. So this card is a great 3-up as well in the deck. Just basically shut down the opponent where they can't search. And then we play 2 copies of Effect Veiler just to stop your opponent from monster effects, which is a really great thing for this deck. I feel like 2 copies of Effect Veiler is fine. I didn't want the 3rd one because I'm playing other hand traps in the deck in the form of Infinite Impermanence. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Monster Reborn. This is here basically to extend your plays because you will be synchroing a lot in this deck. So you'll have a lot of monsters that you want back on the field to extend your plays. This card is a really good card to be able to top deck and be able to go in for more card advantage. We then play a single copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. This card is very helpful to be able to just out back row. So I played as a 1-of in this build. Playing a single copy of the Swordsoul Sacred Summit. This card is a great card in the deck as well because it's basically a Monster Reborn that lets you target a Swordsoul monster in your graveyard, or if you control a Synchro monster, you can target a Worm monster instead to special summon it to your side of the field, which is a great effect for this card. We then play 3 copies of Swordsoul Emergence. This card is the Rhoda of the deck that has the ability to add any Swordsoul monster from your deck to your hand, or if you control another Synchro monster, you can add 1 Worm monster from your deck to your hand instead, which is a really good effect to be able to add the Worm monsters that you need, like any of your Tenyi monsters, like your copy of your Adahara to give you a level 1 tuner monster, or you can just use this card to be able to search your copies of Moe or your Strategist or Taie, which is a really good thing for this build. We then play for the last 3 spells. We're just going to be playing 3 copies of the Vessel of the Dragon to Cycle. This card is a really, really good card because it's a Foolish Burial and a Search at the same time, because it has the ability that you can send a Worm monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then if you control a face-up non-effect monster, which is going to be your Monk of Tenyi or one of your token monsters, then you can also add from your deck to your hand 1 Tenyi monster with a different name from monsters sent to the graveyard, or the monster you sent to the graveyard, which is a really good effect to be able to just get the exact card that you need with this card. It's a great card to be able to have in your hand, especially if you open up a Tenyi monster that you can special summon out to your side of the field, link for the Monk, and then activate this card is just absolutely nuts. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Swordsoul Blackout. Swordsoul Blackout is a good 2-of in my opinion because it has the ability to let you target 1 of your Worm monsters you control and 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy them. This card is really, really good because basically it's an Icarus attack, and so it's a great 2-of. And then we play 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Infinite Impermanence is basically just negates monster effects, and it has the ability basically to activate it from your hand if you don't control any other cards. So it's a really good card to open in your opening hand. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Grandmaster. Grandmaster is a really good 2-of and going to be one of the first cards you're going to be summoning from the extra deck in this deck beside your copy of the Tenyi Monk. And it has the ability, if this card is Synchro Summon, you can add to your hand or banish a Swordsoul card, which is a really, really good effect from the deck to your hand. It also has the ability that you get to quick effect banish a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster from your hand or graveyard, and then target 1 other effect monster on the field and negate its effects until the end of the turn, which is a really good effect, especially since it's a quick effect. Basically, it's a walking negate and a searcher, which is just absolutely insane. We then play a single copy of the Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign. This card is a good 1-of in here and combos very well with your copies of Blackout because it has the ability to for each banished card, this card gains 100 attack and defense, and for each in your opponent's monsters, lose 100 attack for each monster each card that's banished. It also has the ability, if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish a card from the graveyard instead. And if a card is banished from the graveyard, then you can banish 1 card each from your opponent's field and graveyard, which is a really good effect to be able to just immediately get rid of a card on your opponent's side of the field and from their graveyard. I really love that effect, and it combos very well with Blackout because Blackout will target this card to destroy it. And basically, it'll stop that by just banishing a card from the graveyard and turn your copy of Blackout into basically a pop 2 and a banish from field and graveyard, which is really insane. We then play a single copy of the Swordsoul Sinister Sovereign, which is the new Swordsoul card from Battle of Chaos. I'm currently proxying this card, which you guys would like to check out how to make those proxies. You definitely can because I have a video on the channel to do that. But this card is really good because it has the ability that if you synchro summon another worm monster while this monster is on the field, then you can draw a card. And if your opponent special summons a monster except during the damage step, then you can banish one of those monsters, and if you do, inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent, which is a really, really good effect. And then when your opponent activates a spell or trap or effect, quick effect, you can banish that card, and if you do, inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent, which is a really insane effect, because this card is just basically going to burn your opponent for 1200 over and over again. So this card is a really, really good one-of in the deck, and I can't wait to get my hands on one of these cards. We then play 2 copies of Baxia, Brightness of the Yangzing. This card is insanely good in this deck because it's a walking monster reborn and helps us go for our other monster, our Chao Feng. Chao Feng is really good because comboed with your copy of Baxia and your Adahara, this card can basically make it so that your opponent can activate the effects of light monsters, which is really good because it has the ability that when this synchro summon card is on the field, your opponent cannot activate effects of monsters with the same original type as the Yangzing monsters used to synchro summon this card, which is really good because you're always going to use your copy of Baxia to summon this card, so basically you're going to lock them out of light monsters. And then play a single copy of the Virtual QB. This card is here because I feel like it helps me out a lot to be able to have that walking Macrocosmos, depending on the matchup that I'm playing against. 1 copy of Baron de Fleur. This card is absolutely insanely good in this deck and super easy to summon with your strategist. It's a walking negate, and it can once per turn target a card on the field and destroy it, which is really, really good. We play a single copy of the Adamancipator Dragite. Dragite is really good because if you have a water monster in the graveyard, it's a spell and trap negation. Play a single copy of the Draco Berserker, because this card can banish cards, it can attack multiple times, and it can get absolutely humongous. 1 copy of Yazi, because it can pop a card on our field and a card on our opponent's field, and it's just a really good one-of in this deck. Play a single copy of the Shaman, which is a good extender for the deck that has the ability you can discard a card and then target a worm monster in the graveyard and special summon it, which is really good to bring back one of your synchro monsters if they do go to the graveyard. And then we play 2 copies of the Monk to start our Tenyi plays. So this card is a really good 2-of in this particular build, because basically you just special summon any of your Tenyi monsters to your side of the field, link them away, summon this card, and you have your non-effect monster on your side of the field set up for any of your Tenyi effects, which is really, really good. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to be able to play with. I really love the way that this deck plays. Like, going into all those synchro monsters is just absolutely insane. Do you guys want to? I'm going to be doing some test hands on the channel, so definitely be on the lookout for those coming very soon. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.